Eloise stood in the middle of her living room, surrounded by objects that once brought her comfort. Framed photos, layered bookshelves, a coffee table with drawers that hadn't been opened in years. This room, once her sanctuary, now felt like it was closing in. And yet, nothing had changed overnight. It was the same space, but somehow, it had grown heavy, like it was carrying more than just things. It was carrying time. Have you ever walked into a room and felt a tightness in your chest? Not from dust or clutter, but from the weight of everything it represents? That feeling isn't random. It's not laziness. It's not age catching up with you. It's something deeper, emotional clutter that sneaks in through memories, regrets, and the fear of letting go. Eloise didn't know where to begin. She wasn't even sure if she wanted to start. Every object had a reason, a story, a silence, and that's what made it so hard. Because decluttering isn't about throwing things away. It's about facing the parts of life we've tried to press pause on. If you've ever stood still in your own home, overwhelmed by the thought of change, you're not alone. And if this already feels too familiar, like this video, so we know we're reaching the right people. People who are ready to turn their cluttered spaces back into places of peace. Because the hardest part of decluttering, it's not sorting the stuff. It's confronting what it brings up. And chances are, what's stopping you isn't what you see. It's what's hiding underneath. Eloise Mayweather never saw herself as someone who'd be buried in clutter. In fact, she used to roll her eyes at hoarding shows on TV. But life, as it often does, had a quiet way of piling up around her. She's 74 now, a retired jazz pianist with a record of improvising her way out of almost anything except, it seems, her own home. She once lit up smoky lounges in New Orleans, her fingers dancing over keys with effortless grace. These days, her fingers fumble with the broken latch of a cabinet that hasn't closed properly since 2004. Eloise lives alone in a cozy brownstone that holds more than just memories. Each room tells a different story, some loud and joyful, others quiet and unfinished. Her kitchen has an unopened fondue set from a holiday party that never happened. Her hallway closet hides 6 umbrellas, 4 of which haven't worked since the Clinton administration. Her guest bedroom, once filled with laughter from her nieces and nephews, now holds boxes labeled miscellaneous, important, and sort later, boxes she stopped opening years ago. But Eloise isn't disorganized. Not really. She's thoughtful, intentional even, a part-time crossword queen. She starts every morning with black coffee and a pen. Her mind is still sharp as a tack, quick with a pun or a quote from Ella Fitzgerald. And she's hilarious, dry, observant, with a laugh that sneaks up on you. Still, there's one thing she never jokes about: the quiet guilt that creeps in whenever she tries to tidy up. She tells herself she'll start tomorrow. Just one drawer, just one shelf. But when tomorrow comes, the drawer stays closed. Because it's never just one drawer. It's her mother's recipes, her husband's ties, the programs from every concert she ever played. It's years of loving, losing, and living, all stacked neatly behind cupboard doors and under couch cushions. What makes Eloise different is also what makes her deeply relatable. She's not a cautionary tale. She's a reflection of the lives we've built, the people we've loved, and the quiet hesitation we feel when it's time to let go. She's not stuck. She's simply overwhelmed by meaning. And if you've ever stood in your own home, unsure whether something is worth keeping or finally ready to release, you may have more in common with Eloise Mayweather than you think. Trigger number 1, the memory minefield. Eloise hadn't meant to open that box, not today. It was tucked away at the back of her linen closet, under a stack of mismatched towels and a dusty electric blanket she hadn't used since her sister's last visit. But while searching for an old photo frame, her fingers brushed against the lid, and something in her, curiosity, maybe nostalgia, urged her to lift it. Inside, time collapsed. Her husband's sheet music, neatly folded and yellowed with age, still smelled faintly of cedar and tobacco. The napkin from their wedding, soft cream with their initials embossed in gold, was there too, creased and delicate. And at the very bottom, nestled in an old scarf, were their son's baby shoes. Worn, soft, impossibly small. Eloise didn't cry. She rarely did. But her throat tightened. The box wasn't just full of keepsakes. It was full of decisions she hadn't been ready to make. What do you do with a life lived in moments? How do you choose what stays and what must finally go? This is what we call the memory minefield. It's not clutter in the traditional sense. These items aren't broken or useless. They're sacred, and yet they hold you still. Not because they're bad, but because they demand emotional energy every time you see them, touch them, or think about parting with them. The paralysis that comes from sentimental clutter is unique, especially for those of us who've lived long enough to lose, to love deeply, to carry layers of identity within our possessions. For many seniors, this kind of clutter is the hardest to face. It's not just stuff, it's evidence of life. How can you let go of that? The key isn't to eliminate memory. It's to honor it in a way that doesn't overwhelm your space or your spirit. Here's a gentle, effective strategy. Create what we call a memory capsule. Choose just 10 items that truly define the story of your life. Not the objects that guilt you into keeping them, but the ones that light you up when you see them. The ones that tell your story with clarity, not chaos. For the rest, take photos. Write a few words about their meaning. And then, let them go, knowing the memory will stay, even if the object doesn't. This approach frees you from emotional gridlock while still preserving your legacy. It gives your memories form, but not clutter. And now, we'd love to hear from you. What's one memory item you could never part with? Share your story in the comments below. Because in this community, we don't just declutter, we remember, we honor, and we grow forward together. Trigger number 2, the price tag guilt trap. Tucked behind a stack of old cookbooks and a jar of expired cinnamon sticks, Eloise spotted it, the bread maker. The one she bought in 1996 after watching a late-night infomercial that promised the smell of fresh sourdough would change her mornings forever. She used it once. The dough never rose, the crust was uneven, and she never tried again. But for nearly 30 years, that machine stayed right where it was, untouched, collecting dust and quiet judgment. She couldn't explain why she never donated it. It wasn't sentimentality. She had no memories attached to it. What she felt was guilt. The kind that's familiar to so many people after 60. Because letting go of something expensive, even if it's useless, feels like admitting defeat. This is what we call the price tag guilt trap, and it's one of the sneakiest triggers in a senior's home. You see, after decades of working, saving, and being careful with money, older adults often carry a deep sense of respect for the value of things. "I paid good money for that" becomes a silent mantra. But here's the truth no one wants to admit. That money is already gone. Holding on to an object out of guilt doesn't bring the dollars back. It only costs you more in peace, in space, in simplicity. There's also a hidden emotional layer. The object represents effort, a decision you made in good faith. So letting go can feel like admitting you made a mistake. But here's the shift that changes everything. Keeping something that doesn't serve you doesn't honor the money spent. It extends the cost. So ask yourself, what's costing you more right now? Money lost then, or calm lost now? Eloise realized she'd been paying interest on that bread maker, not in dollars, but in regret, in guilt, in shelf space. And that realization freed her to act. Here's a practical step that works wonders. Create a never used, never missed pile. Go room by room and pull out any item you've never used and haven't thought about in years. Then ask one honest question. Would I buy this again today? If the answer is no, it's time to let it go. This pile isn't about shame. It's about reclaiming your present. You're not losing value. You're recovering clarity. And here's a surprising bonus. Donating items like this can become an act of generosity. Someone else might actually use that bread maker and find joy in it. Meanwhile, you gain back the space and serenity it was silently stealing. So, what's hiding in your home that's quietly draining your energy just because of what you once paid for it? And don't go anywhere, because the next trigger is even more complicated. What if the item weighing you down isn't even yours to begin with? Trigger number 3, other people's expectations in your home. In the corner of Eloise's living room sat a cherry wood end table she never liked. It didn't match her style. It didn't match her memories. It didn't even serve a real purpose, unless you counted being a landing spot for mail and mugs. The table had belonged to her cousin Marjorie, passed along during a downsizing years ago with a cheery, you'll find a place for it. Won't you? Eloise said yes, because saying no felt rude. And so, the table stayed. Not out of love, but out of obligation. Then there was the china cabinet in the dining room. A gift from her former daughter-in-law who once insisted, "You'll need this for when the family comes over." But the family stopped coming after the divorce, and now the cabinet just stood there, tall and hollow, filled with dishes she hadn't touched since 2007. These pieces didn't bring joy. They brought quiet resentment. This is what we call the expectation clutter. Items in your home that you didn't choose for yourself, but you keep because someone else once expected you to. It's more common than people admit, especially among seniors. Why? Because we were raised in a time where being polite often meant sacrificing your comfort. Saying yes to hand-me-downs was considered gracious. Refusing a family heirloom could make you seem cold or ungrateful. So you kept it all, even if it didn't fit your home, your needs, or your spirit. But here's the truth that rarely gets said. Keeping something just to avoid hurting someone else's feelings often ends up hurting you. Slowly, quietly, room by room. Now ask yourself something. Does this item reflect the life I want now? Eloise did. And that question shifted everything. Because honoring your space is also honoring your present and your peace. If an object is in your home out of guilt, fear, or obligation, it's not a treasure. It's a tether. It doesn't mean you don't appreciate the gesture. It doesn't mean you don't care about the person who gave it. But what you own should support the life you're living today, not the expectations of others from years ago. A practical approach. Try the permission to release rule. For every item you inherited or were gifted, ask yourself, would I keep this if it came with no backstory? If the answer is no, you have full permission to release it. If you're worried about hurting someone's feelings, consider this. Letting go of an item isn't rejecting the person, it's reclaiming your space. You can still keep the relationship without keeping the table, the cabinet, or the guilt. Have you ever kept something just to avoid hurting someone's feelings? Maybe you're looking at it right now. Let's talk about it in the comments, because sometimes just saying it out loud is the first step to letting go. Trigger number 4, the what if I need it someday spiral. Eloise reached into the wicker basket near the hallway closet and pulled out what looked like a nest of tangled cords, chargers for devices she no longer owned, mystery remotes with worn-out buttons, and adapters for electronics that hadn't worked in over a decade. She laughed to herself, almost embarrassed. "What if I need it someday?" she whispered, knowing full well she hadn't needed any of it in years. She wasn't alone in this spiral. In fact, it's one of the most common clutter traps among older adults. This isn't about laziness, it's about security. As we age, change becomes harder. The body slows, routines become sacred, and the future starts to feel less predictable. And when the world outside feels unstable, we cling to the idea of being prepared. We hold on just in case. This mindset, what we call the what if I need it spiral, often starts small, saving a spare spatula, a coat 3 sizes too big, an extra phone charger. But over time, those just-in-case items begin to take over drawers, closets, garages, and even mental space. The irony? The more we try to prepare for every possible scenario, the less space we have to enjoy the life we're living now. Here's a fresh, powerful mindset shift. Stop saving for a version of your life you've already moved on from. That's where the aging in place rule comes in. It's a simple filter designed especially for seniors who are preparing to age safely and comfortably in their own homes. Ask this: does this item serve who I am becoming, not who I used to be? For example, do you really need 4 sets of baking trays when your arthritis makes baking rare? Do you need 3 vacuum cleaners when your home is now a single story? This isn't about deprivation. It's about creating a home that works for your current season of life. And here's the deeper truth. Every item you release makes more room for freedom, physical and emotional. It makes your home easier to clean, easier to move through, and easier to love again. For US seniors especially, where downsizing and aging in place are becoming the most popular living choices, letting go of the maybe someday items is a key part of preserving independence. One practical trick? Start a box labeled "Haven't used in 2 years." If something lands in that box, store it out of sight for a month. If you don't go looking for it, it's a strong sign you're ready to let it go. And here's something to remember. Peace of mind doesn't come from storing every possible backup. It comes from knowing what matters now and letting that be enough. But this next trigger? It's different. It doesn't come from a visible object or even from the past. It's far more subtle, and it's stopping more seniors than any other without them even knowing it. Trigger number 5, the invisible enemy, decision fatigue. Eloise stood frozen in the hallway, holding a shoebox filled with receipts, buttons, and a postcard from a friend she hadn't spoken to in 20 years. The plan was to clear the hallway shelf today, just that one shelf. But now, she was 5 objects in and already exhausted. Not physically, mentally. Each item, no matter how small, raised a new question. Should I keep this? What if I regret it? What if it matters later? This wasn't about clutter anymore. This was the quiet drain of decision fatigue, an invisible weight that builds up, not from how much we carry, but from how often we're asked to make choices about it. And for many seniors, this fatigue runs deeper than we realize. After decades of making decisions for families, households, jobs, and friends, the simple act of choosing can start to feel like a chore. It's not that we're indecisive. It's that we're worn out by the mental strain of constantly being the one who decides. Every keep or toss decision isn't just a moment. It's a memory, a worry, or a guilt trip wrapped in disguise. And when these moments stack up, they turn even the smallest task into something that feels impossible. Here's the truth. The hardest part of decluttering isn't the lifting, sorting, or organizing. It's the mental sorting we do before we even touch a thing. That's where the real fatigue comes from. But here's a gentler, more compassionate approach. Instead of trying to declutter the house, try just choosing 5 items. That's it. No clock, no schedule, no pressure. Just 5 things in your space that you can release today, for no other reason than they no longer serve your life as it is now. They might be easy, a chipped mug, a dried pen, a faded magazine. Or they might carry more weight, a duplicate gift, a hobby you quietly outgrew. Let those 5 choices be your progress, not the whole job. The goal isn't to finish, it's to move. And when you do this again tomorrow, or the next day when you feel ready, your confidence will grow. Small, consistent choices build momentum in a way that pressure never can. That's what Eloise learned. She stopped aiming for perfection and started choosing peace, one decision at a time. And slowly, her home began to feel less like a storage unit and more like a reflection of the woman she was now, not the one she was decades ago. So here's your invitation. Could you find just 5 things today that no longer need to stay? You don't have to push yourself. Just start where you are. Then come back and tell us in the comments. What did you let go of, and how did it feel? Eloise didn't wake up one morning to a perfectly decluttered home. There was no big after moment, no dramatic reveal like the makeover shows promise. What happened was quieter and far more meaningful. It started with one choice, then another, a few easy releases, a few hard ones, and then a small shift she didn't expect. She began to feel different in her own space. One afternoon, as sunlight poured into her sitting room, she looked around and noticed something that caught her off guard. The room breathed. The shelves weren't bare, but they weren't bursting. The chair by the window, once hidden under a pile of mail and old pillows, was now a place to sit and think again. Even the air seemed lighter, more welcoming. For the first time in years, her home felt like it belonged to her again. Not to the past, not to her obligations, not to the things she thought she might need or the memories she was afraid to lose. Just her, Eloise Mayweather, as she was now. She hadn't cleared every drawer. There were still decisions waiting in closets and boxes tucked under the bed. But the point wasn't to finish. The point was that she'd started. And starting gave her something she hadn't felt in a long time: control. Decluttering isn't about perfection. It's not about becoming a minimalist or getting everything just right. It's about realignment. It's about making sure your surroundings reflect the season of life you're living today, not the roles you've already retired or the expectations you no longer carry. Eloise once believed that letting go would feel like giving up, but what she found was freedom, space to breathe, room to rest, a home that didn't weigh her down but lifted her up. And as she walked slowly through her now calmer kitchen, her words captured the entire journey. I didn't need to finish. I just needed to stop being afraid to start. That moment, realizing she was no longer avoiding her space, but enjoying it, was the breakthrough. It wasn't a grand transformation. It was better. It was real, and deeply hers. So ask yourself, what would your home feel like if it reflected who you are now, not who you were then? What would it mean to simply begin? Because you don't need to do it all today. You just need to take one honest step, and the rest, it unfolds from there. Decluttering, for so many seniors, is often misunderstood. It gets reduced to a chore list, a weekend project, or something someone else tells you to do. But in truth, it's much deeper and far more personal. It's not really about the stuff. It's about what the stuff represents. Choices, roles, chapters that have already been lived. But here's the secret no one talks about enough. Decluttering isn't about what you're giving up. It's about what you're making room for. When Eloise finally began letting go, she didn't lose herself. She found herself. She made space not just on her shelves, but in her spirit. And that space invited in calm, clarity, and a renewed sense of self. Because at this stage of life, peace isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. Seniors today are redefining what it means to grow older. Whether you're downsizing, aging in place, or simply wanting to breathe easier in your own home, clearing your space can be the most powerful way to reclaim your next chapter. The real gift of decluttering? Freedom. Freedom from guilt. Freedom from invisible obligations. Freedom from the weight of maybe someday. And most importantly, freedom to live fully in the now. So ask yourself, what do you want more of in your life right now? Space? Simplicity? Stillness? Those things aren't out of reach. They're just hidden beneath years of what-ifs and I might need this. But you can uncover them, one step at a time, one decision at a time. If this message spoke to your heart, like this video and share it with someone who's quietly overwhelmed, just like Eloise once was. Someone who might be ready, not to finish, but to start. And we'd love to hear from you. Which hidden trigger has held you back the most? Leave your thoughts in the comments. We're here, and we're listening. And if you haven't yet, subscribe and turn on notification, because this journey of letting go and living lighter is just beginning, and you don't have to walk it alone.